I guess my question with all this is, China obviously wants to make money, but I would think even with all the money you can make with forced organ harvesting, doesn't that seem like such a high risk business? Like if that comes out, how could they afford that? Why would they think they can risk doing that?
Look, I think that's a great question. I don't really have a fantastic answer to that, except that there's a lot of irrationality. I think two things. One is that it's very hard to change. When the party allows you to do something, it's very hard for them to change their policy. It's kind of like you set this steamroller in one direction, and then you have to somehow turn it, and they're not good at that, particularly when there's a lot of money involved. Secondly, they are destroying it. Don't forget, they're doing two things. They're not just making money. They're destroying enemies of the state. 28-year-olds are the most dangerous people you have in any movement. That was true in Falun Gong. It's true with the Uyghurs. 28-year-olds, these are the people who are no longer youths. They have a little bit of the beginnings of wisdom, yet they're in perfect health. They're vibrant. And you are taking out that population. That's very important.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing to that, which is that, you're talking about the Communist Party making a lot of money, but I think what's probably happening on the ground, and Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that the people who are making money are individuals. So you've got individual doctors, you've got individual party members and people in charge of camps who are all getting their cuts, right? So it's not like it's not like Xi Jinping is like, give me all the money to support the Chinese economy. It's just a bunch of corrupt people, probably tens of thousands scattered across, and it's very hard to stop that corruption once it happens, in the way that it's always hard to stop corruption.
I agree with you, Matt, but I honestly don't know. And I mean, I think it's very important. One of the things I'm sort of faced with in these, when I give talks to kind of more human rights audiences, is some guy will stand up, usually about my age, he'll stand up and say, I've got a question. Why don't you follow the money? Guys love to say that. Okay. It is just, I talk about sort of dumb mansplaining. It's like, yeah, that was the name of a movie. Okay. Right? It's like, okay, it wasn't the name of the movie. But it's the key statement out of what all the president's men or whatever, the Watergate movie. Look, you can't follow the money in China. Everybody lies about money. Money, when you make money, you record it as a loss. It's a negative in China. Okay. It's very, very hard because everybody is trying to evade taxes. And that is part of the society. It's part of Chinese culture. So we can't really follow the money, but I suspect it's much what you just said, Matt, that it goes to a lot of people. A lot of people wet their beaks on this. I think the deeper problem here, though, is that I think even though the Chinese have kind of, Beijing, or the party, has kind of wanted to stop this and rationalize it, and partly so they can wet their beak in a more formal way, all right, especially with the Uyghurs, because with Falun Gong, it was really out of control. You had those competing courtroom scenes that I mentioned. But the future for China has always been pharmaceuticals, always. Okay, that's where the big money is. You have this huge population which you can test drugs on. And, if they die or get sick or something, you can hush it up really easily. So you can really move fast. Pharmaceuticals has been a pillar industry for China. It was always that way. It was supposed to be that way. But what ruined it? Well, COVID. Okay. The pandemic ruined all that because selling pharmaceuticals is a confidence game. People have to have confidence in your product. Even it doesn't even matter about the testing. They have to have confidence that it's coming from a good background. And at this point, any Chinese equivalent of the FDA is laughable. I mean, it's not a good competitor. And in fact, their COVID vaccines were terrible. Were 50% effective at best. Look, I think it is still one of the strangest things to me that they've still been considered. They've continued to do this. I agree with you. It is a huge question. To me, everything rational would tell me, stop doing that, put everything into pharmaceuticals, get rich. Okay? Get really rich. This has never made sense to me. But apparently it's so it's so developed. This is what we tried to get to in our 2016 report that I did with David Kilgore and David Matus, was, how huge this industry has become. And so it's very hard to shut down. And the only thing they could do was kind of rationalize it and just pull it out from one population. Now, eventually they are going to run out of Uyghurs. It will take some time, but they will. And when they do, I think they'll start to look at some people from Hong Kong, and they're certainly looking at the Tibetans now. They've just started DNA testing and blood testing the entire Tibetan population. They've done it to the Mongolians.
If they get Taiwan.
And Taiwan. And that's where we run into something interesting. If I just briefly change the subject, if you want to segue out of the organ harvesting, because I was living in Taiwan. I just got back from Taiwan 2 weeks ago.
Well, I guess I would just add one more quick point about what you just said. Like, also, there is now an entire system full of people who are very incentivized to make sure that this system never comes to light.
Absolutely. I think that's another part of it, is the secrecy is its own support in a certain way. There are people who are dependent on making money on this. One of the things that Falun Gong researchers noticed was that there's an incredibly high suicide rate among transplant surgeons. And, I had kind of a funny conversation. I believe it was somebody from New Tang Dynasty. No, it was probably from Epoch Times. But somebody I knew at Epoch Times, not Matt Robertson, but somebody else, called me up and said, Ethan, look at these suicide figures. It's unbelievable, right? All these people jumping out of windows and so forth. And they said, it's really kind of a, it's in a way, it's really horrible to look at this. But in another way, I feel, at least these people feel guilty or have a conscience. And I'm like, they didn't kill themselves. They were pushed. It's like, come on. I mean, this is mob action, okay? And they're basically told, if you don't, here's the gun, finish yourself off, otherwise we'll kill your whole family. I mean, that's very Roman, right? This is something that's been around since the hills. But I definitely think that's going on. And I think in some of these cases, they're considered to be unreliable, that they might turn, that they might speak to somebody, that they might even anonymously. And if that's uncovered or there's any sense that the person is no longer reliable, they're finished off.
Well, I mean, that would be a good reason why there's so few eyewitness testimonies from Chinese doctors, which is that the small percentage of those doctors who are the most likely to be willing to speak out against it have sort of been uncovered and decided of their own accord to jump out of a high window.
Well, yes, in a sense, there's that. And I think the other thing is, of course, first of all, when people say that, it's a little bit absurd. I mean, people say, well, why aren't there more doctors coming out? It's like, really, do you remember, I remember during the Holocaust that, we just had that, just all those Nazi commandants standing up and saying, I didn't want to talk about this, but something terrible is going on in Germany. I'm sorry. Do you remember that? I somehow it escapes my memory that anyone from the German side stood up and said, we're killing off all the Jews. There's a final solution.
Were we supposed to learn something from the Holocaust? I
don't know. I mean, it's old history, it's for your grandfather or something. Look, the point is that why would we expect that doctors would do this? It's a miracle that we have Vertotti around. We also have Dr. Ko Wen-je, the mayor of Taipei, who admitted to me, and also admitted to me in writing that this had happened, that he was, we're trying to work out a deal for some of his patients back in Taiwan to come over and get some organs. And I think it was Wuxi People's Hospital. He didn't tell me that, but I've kind of deduced that since then. And Wuxi People's Hospital, basically the doctors there said, well, look, we're giving you a deal because we'll give you kind of the family price, about 50% of the usual foreigner price. Not really the Chinese price, but the family price. And all the organs will come from Falun Gong. And these people, they don't drink, they don't smoke, they practice very healthy Qigong. And so you don't have to worry about the quality of the organs. They're not coming from prisoners who've been drug addicts and so forth, or hepatitis. Now, Dr. Ka admitted that to my face. And also to Li Shai Lamish, who was in the room with me. We both heard it. And I proceeded to eventually clarify the story with him and say, is this correct? And he came back and said, yeah, the story seems okay. And then eventually I asked if I could use his name in my book. And then he got involved in politics. And all of a sudden he said, oh, well, Mr. Gutmann must be confusing me with some other doctor. This is okay. He's not in China. Nobody's forcing him. Nobody's going to push him out a window. Well, maybe they would. But the problem is that even in a free society like Taiwan, there's a blackmail potential, right? I'm sure he did a lot of things in China, some of which he probably doesn't want them to come out. But people do things in China. Even I did things in China I'm not so proud of.
Well, that's a good time to pitch your book from 20 years ago, Losing the New China, which I know it's not relevant, but having read it, it was actually really fascinating. It's a really interesting look at Westerners going into China to make money, one of whom was you.
One of whom was me, but I wasn't really there to make money. I was kind of more there to have a good time, I guess. And see
well, that chapter's in there too.
I will remind everyone this is a family-friendly show.
It's a family-friendly show, and I'm still married to over 25 years now. The same woman. We're in the same house. So I think everything's worked out okay. But look, the bottom line here is that we can't expect doctors to just come out and tell us everything. And we can't expect them to put it on the internet. And this is why I do the research I do, which involves going out and talking to witnesses wherever they are. Hopefully they're in Turkey. It's much easier to do it there. Okay. Or, but most of the time you have to go all the way to Kazakhstan or some terrible state, which is authoritarian and basically sees the Chinese interest as whatever Beijing wants, Beijing gets. And so it's very problematic. And the Chinese put up a very good fight here. And they've done a great job on squelching this information. But, and this is where I give tremendous credit is to the medical world for finally seeing through that. Or saying, look, if there's even a chance that this is going on, we simply can't be involved. And that is an amazing transformation, beginnings of a transformation. There may be a lot of fighting to come in this area. And I don't think it will solve it. I'll also be honest there.